Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Monday morning to you all. Hope you guys are waking up and having a wonderful start to your day and a great beginning to your new week out there so far. We got a lot to go over in this morning's video, and this video is really just going to go into discussing today's severe weather events. We're not going to talk much on the days to come. We will speak on the outlooks as far as Tuesday, Wednesday, into Thursday, but not going to get detailed on it. We're just going to focus on the details for today's severe weather event. So what we're going to do here is this is probably going to be one of my most detailed videos ever as far as speaking on any given event that I've ever talked about. I'm going to break it down state by state, show the outlook for every state. I'm going to show what short range model guidance shows for every single state. And just, if you just want to hear about Minnesota, you'll be able to click on a timestamp for that. If you just want to hear about Missouri, Iowa, you'll be able to click on a timestamp for that. So just go on ahead and jump ahead, do what you got to do. I totally get it. That's why I get very detailed. I don't breeze over massive areas of the country and just kind of expect you to get the information you need out of that. And some people can, some people can't. But I love getting detailed. So we're going to break it down literally state by state for you folks. So utilize those timestamps. It could be a big day today, but I could see some fail modes also. But regardless, the atmosphere supports a significant severe weather event, and we do have the chances of that. If you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it, and if anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put it in the comments below. Let's take a broad look at things first. This is the latest from the Storm Prediction Center. Just note that new information will come out in about 2 hours, so they'll make some tweaks to this. I don't think it'll go up a category, and I really don't think it'll go down a category either. It'll probably stay about the same, but there could be some tweaks on the outer edges of some of these outlooks. And it could shrink, could broaden. Anyways, the red area, level 4 out of 5, what we call a moderate risk. The next risk up is a high risk. It would show up in pink. We don't have that, and I don't expect that for today. The orange area is a level 3 out of 5, an enhanced risk. And then the yellow area is a level 2 out of 5, a slight risk. And then the dark green around it is a level 1 out of 5, a marginal risk. And the light green is just a general risk of thunderstorms. So the highlighted area has always been right here where Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa kind of come together. And that really hasn't changed over the last couple of days. So let's go on and break down what's driving this outlook for each individual state. Let's break down Minnesota first. And as I hit backspace and go through all the outlooks for each state, I'm going to hope and pray that it goes through pretty quick. The Storm Prediction Center site has been going pretty slow. It probably doesn't help that I have a million tabs pulled up. But if I pulled up every single outlook for every state where I could just click on it, I would literally have, I would probably have triple the amount of tabs pulled up, and I just couldn't do that to my poor computer. It's already probably about to launch into space from all the tabs pulled up, but it's a trooper. But anyways, this is the tornado outlook for the state of Minnesota. The red area, that is a 15% risk of a tornado within 25 miles in a given location. The yellow area, which that red area includes Minneapolis, higher populated area, right? Wild stuff. The yellow area, that's a 10% risk of a tornado. The brown is a 5. The green is a 2. Not much of a tornado threat when you get up here in like northwestern portions of the state. But if you look at the black outline region, and the black dash is going in between, this covers all the yellow and the red area. That's a 10% risk of a stronger tornado. Storm Prediction Center considers that an EF2 or higher. So strong to even intense tornadoes are possible for today and portions of the state of Minnesota. Now let's go on and hit that backspace. Okay, it's moving pretty quick for us. That's good. The wind outlook, this is what I was wrong on. I thought that we would get a little bump up maybe to a hatched risk as far as the winds, and we still could. But, I've been honking the horn at that for the last few days, and I'll never not admit when I was wrong on something, and certainly have been wrong on this. But there's still a higher end threat of winds. In the red area, that is a 30% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. The yellow, a 15% risk of that. So watch out for strong, even some severe wind gusts. I think that we could get some wind gusts in excess of 70, 80 miles per hour for today. Now let's look at the hail outlook for Minnesota. All right, in that red area, that is where we have a 30% chance of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. Okay, the yellow area, that is a 15% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch. And then if you look in the black outline region with the black dashes going in between it, which covers up, by the way, all of central and southern Minnesota, including Rochester, Minneapolis, St. Paul, St. Cloud, that is a 10% risk, not added on to the 30. It's its own deal. A 10% risk of significant sized hail, which is 2 inch in diameter or larger. So let's break down what the radar could do, what it could look like later on today. I guess you can say what it could do also. We already have storms rumbling through, and this is the time frame up here if you're wondering. 8 a.m. We already have storms rumbling through the state of Minnesota right now. But as we move forward here in time, this initial round, which has been showing up on model guidance pretty well, will clear on out, and then we'll have a clearing. So we get to 1 p.m., 2 p.m., we're already starting to get storms right up here, like in, I guess you would say, central, west central Minnesota. And listen, these storms will be kind of hanging out around a bit of a thermo boundary, meaning, I mean, it's right up against stable and unstable conditions. So the further south you get with these storms, probably the worse they could be, the more they could produce all hazards. So we continue to move into about 4 p.m., okay? But this is around 4 p.m. This is when the storms really start to get concerning in the state of Minnesota. You see these storms right here. I mean, they're not really discrete, but you see these circles coming off some of these storms. This is where, I mean, really any of these storms could produce tornadoes. This is, and damaging winds, obviously, and large hail, all hazards. 4 p.m., we got this line of storms sweeping across southern areas of Minnesota. These could be severe up here, but I don't think they'll be surface-based. I think they'll be more elevated, more of a hail threat and damaging wind threat. But these line of storms will blast through Minneapolis, maybe around afternoon. Remember, this isn't exactly how it's going to unfold. This is just simulated model guidance trying to help us out on what these storms could look like later today in the timing. But we got this one cell cruising through the central portion of the state. You see that little long squiggly circle area coming off of it. That means that we could have a rotating updraft, stronger updraft, producing all hazards. And then look at these cells, getting close to Duluth. It's around 8 p.m. Look at these storms down here near Rochester. I'm telling you, the further south and southeast you get in the state of Minnesota, the higher the tornado threat. So these storms, I mean, this is around 7, 8 p.m. and near Rochester, give or take, west, east, south, north, could produce all hazards, could be a tornado, anything. So it's really everywhere, right? It's tough. One thing that model guidance really likes is this line of storms rumbling through the southern half of the state, and it could produce all hazards, shows additional cells up here, etc. Now let's talk about Wisconsin. So Wisconsin, this is the tornado outlook in the red area. That is a 15% chance of a tornado within 25 miles in a given location. The yellow area is a 10% risk of a tornado. If I mix my numbers up at all, you guys correct me in the comments, put a timestamp in there, because when I'm being so repetitive with this information, chances are I'm going to twist something up. Definitely not perfect, and won't tell you that I am, but I'm going to do that occasionally. The brown area, that is a 5% risk of a tornado. So, 15% risk in the red. I mean, that's Eau Claire, guys. I mean, that's down to Portage, La Crosse. And then almost the entire state of Wisconsin has a 10% risk of a tornado. And then the entire red, just like Minnesota, the entire red and yellow area has a 10% risk of a strong tornado, EF2 or higher. So a hatched risk, significant, a chance at significant tornadoes. Now let's backspace. It looks like we're moving pretty good. The site's working pretty well for us. This is the wind threat. Red area, 30% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. This is where our best low-level jet will be. So winds will be mixing at the surface and allowing for higher wind gusts at the surface. And then the yellow area is a 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. And then the hail threats. Almost the entire state of Wisconsin has a risk of significant sized hail. So the red area, that is a 30% chance of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. The yellow area, that is a 15% chance. And that's more so tucked up against the western coastline of Lake Michigan. But I mean, Eau Claire, Madison, Portage, up to Woosau, Rhinelander, hopefully I'm saying these town names right, Hayward, Rice Lake, Platteville, I mean, Eau Claire, La Crosse, guys had that 10% risk, a significant sized hail. That black outline region, black dashes going in between it, that means you have a 10% risk of 2 inch in diameter or larger hail. Now, once again, we will look at the radar for the state of Wisconsin. We have this line of storms that's in Minnesota right now. This is packing a punch. Last time I checked, they really weren't anything that was severe or tornado warned. There's not a lot of atmospheric ingredients that's moved into this area yet, so you don't have much of a tornado threat. Low-level jet really hasn't ramped up in this region yet, but we get into 10 a.m. We got some storms trying to move into Eau Claire, Duluth. We get into 11 a.m. We get into lunchtime. Whatever's left of these storms will continue to move across central and northern areas of Wisconsin. They'll eventually get into the UP. We'll talk about that here in a second. And then notice immediately around right after lunchtime, time frame up here, these storms start to fire down here in southwestern and western Wisconsin, Eau Claire down to La Crosse, everywhere in between. And you see how they have these shades of pink in these storms. These are stronger, the severe cells, and very large hail can be produced with these. That's why you have a chance at significant hail. These start to move to the middle portion of the state. And then we start to get into 3 p.m. And then that kind of second batch of storms moves in. And then out. Green Bay could get hit by some storms the middle of the afternoon. We got additional convection storm activity that fires up here. One thing you'll notice, though, not a whole lot for southern Wisconsin yet. And then storms form in more of the central portion of the state. And I do think, listen, this model guidance isn't perfect. I do think we'll have cells potentially down here, too. That's why you have the 15% risk of tornadoes for a reason down here. Just because you don't see a colored region on your town or your county here on this map does not mean you're not going to get a storms. We're showing you the best available information that we have. And then the next long range HRRR model will come out in the next couple hours, and it might just show explosive supercells. And then you think it's over, you get to 7, 8 p.m. We got a lot of storm activity up here in Wisconsin, but look at these additional cells firing here in western Wisconsin. Now, these look dangerous. For example, when I broke down Minnesota, I mentioned Rochester, watch out 7, 8 p.m. Then look at these storms that move into or just south of Eau Claire and down to La Crosse around 8, 9 p.m. These could produce strong tornadoes, very large hail, damaging winds. 10 p.m., 11 p.m., you get round after round of storms throughout the state, especially central to northern half of the state. And then we get into 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. It looks like things begin to stabilize and calm down. Now let's break down Michigan. We'll cover the UP and lower Michigan. As far as the tornado outlook, the extreme western, southwestern areas of the UP does have a 10% risk of a tornado. The brown is a 5% risk of a tornado. It gets into Marquette, Traverse City, Houghton, and then the green is a 2% risk of a tornado. Basically, the further west you get in Michigan, whether in the UP or lower Michigan, the higher severe weather threat there is. And also in that yellow area, it's pretty wild. In areas of the UP, you also have a 10% risk of a strong EF2 tornado or higher. Now we back this up. Oh no, don't go slow for us. Don't do it, man. Come on. Seems like it keeps doing it for Michigan too. I don't know. Storm Prediction Center has something against Michigan, I guess. But if we look at the wind outlook, it's moving pretty quick. The red area, that's a 30% chance of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. Yellow area is a 15% risk of that. And then the hail outlook, very small section of the western UP does have a hatched risk for significant hail. So Ironwood, not only do you have the 30% risk of hail, you also have a 10% risk of hail exceeding 2 inch in diameter or larger. The red area, though, is a 30% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch. And then the yellow area is a 15% risk of that. Now, let's break down what the radar could look like for Michigan. Let's talk about the UP first. And let's make sure we have the timestamp in it. It's right here, 9 a.m. We get a 10 a.m. Oh, no. Going to have to, about push the X button and about exit out everything. That would have stunk right in the middle of the video. But we get into 10 a.m., 11 a.m. Not a whole lot going on for the UP. 12 p.m. and then 1 p.m. Storms. First round of storms begins to move into the western UP. This is 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., and then after the first round, we just get additional showers and storms. And listen, like I said, the further west you get into the UP, the worse these storms could be. But you got some very strong storms right over the northern sections of Lake Michigan. You got to watch for these clusterings of storms around 9 p.m. The sun's setting. And then look at these stronger cells trying to enter the picture here in areas of the western UP, especially the southern areas. And just a very stormy night. This is 11 o'clock at night, and we just got storms everywhere across the UP. And look at this. Just south of Marquette, this one's packing a punch, that darker shade of pink and red. And then after we get probably past midnight, things begin to calm down. Now, I do want to show you guys also lower Michigan, so we're going to have to get back out of that and kind of fast forward here. This is 1 p.m. Not a whole lot going on in lower Michigan. And then we get our first round of storms later this afternoon, more so this evening across Traverse City and Gaylord. And then we get another round of storms, maybe later in the evening, and not a whole lot going on really for the lower half of lower Michigan, if you will. I think tomorrow could be a bigger day for you guys. But we get into the middle of the night, we get 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I would just watch out from Mount Pleasant points north over the next 24 hours. So Iowa, another big state, tornado outlook for Iowa. The red region is a 15%, almost said 30, a 15% risk of a tornado within 25 miles in a given location. The yellow area, that is a 10% risk of a tornado. And then the brown area, that is a 5% risk of a tornado. So Mason City, Spencer, you guys got that 15% risk. And then, Des Moines, Ames, Fort Dodge, Dubuque, Davenport, Iowa City, Waterloo, 10% risk of a tornado. And of course, where you have the black outline region, which covers all the red and the yellow 15 and 10% areas, you also have a 10% risk of a stronger tornado, EF2 or higher. Brown is a 5% risk of a tornado within 25 miles of any given location. And we'll back it on up, and man, it's moving nice and quick for us now. I like that. And then we look at the wind outlook. Winds, they're saying the winds aren't going to be quite as big of a deal in the state of Iowa. So you might as well say basically the entire state of Iowa, except the far southwest corner, has a 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. And then the hail outlook, almost the entire state has a 30% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in size or larger. If you do live in like Sioux City or Burlington, you have a 15% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. And then if you live in the black outline regions, with the black dashes going in between, that's that hatched risk. That is a 10% risk of hail exceeding 2 inch in diameter or larger. So big time hail threat in the state of Iowa today. Now, Iowa's a tricky state, guys. I want to show you the latest 06Z long range HRRR model. Okay, we do have some storms in the northern portion, and we will continue to have some storms in the northern portion of the state of Iowa here. These, could pack a punch, but as we start to get into after lunchtime, so it's 1 p.m. Here's the time up here. Things begin to clear out. We get a clearing. This is 2 p.m. This is 4 p.m. We got one storm up here firing. I'm telling you, anything that fires in the state of Iowa today, especially the northern half in Iowa, could be discrete, and it could produce a strong to intense tornado. It's just, will it fire? So for example, if the storms fire right here, they could produce anything, everything, intense weather. But 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., not a whole lot of anything, right? And then by the time we get after midnight, sure, maybe some storms begin to fire in eastern Iowa, but the atmosphere's really beginning to stabilize. Now, I actually want to compare this to the latest 09Z. So this is the latest run that we have, just about. Does it show anything different? Okay, still shows some storms up here, 3 p.m. But now it shows some powerful supercells just a little bit further south. But you see how it has these circle of things coming off like north of Fort Dodge and west of Mason City. Whoever lives in this area right here of Iowa, don't pretend to know every town and city in the country, but this is one of those cells that you got to watch out for. Will it be there? Will it not? Not quite sure. But the new thing that we're seeing here is, look at this cell popping off just southwest of Des Moines. I'm telling you, anything that fires down here could produce everything, and that goes right over Des Moines. This is not Mitch saying at 8 p.m. there is going to be a tornado-producing cell right over Des Moines about 8 p.m., but the new information is starting to pop off a supercell or two down here in central Iowa. And that is a classic looking, based off just pure model guidance, a classic looking cell that could produce a strong to intense tornado. And then we got this line or something coming up right here, in the northeastern portion of the state. And I'm telling you, it's going to be a tough. And this run only goes out to 10 p.m., so I don't know what happens after that. But it does show a powerful supercell forming in central Iowa. And listen, most of the state of Iowa won't get a drop of rain today. But most of the state of Iowa does have a risk of significant severe weather too. So it's just a tough one to figure out. Illinois, tornado outlook. The far northwestern portions of the state, Moline, whatever y'all call that. Sorry, didn't mean it like that, but you got somebody correct me in the comments. Rockford, 10% risk of a tornado, 10% risk also of a stronger EF2 or higher tornado. And the brown area is a 5% risk of a tornado. Galesburg, Quincy, Aurora. And then the green area, that is a 2% risk of a tornado. Peoria kind of right on the fringe of both. Bloomington, Chicago, 2% risk of a tornado. Now, What about the wind outlook? If we can get this through, I'm making decent timing right now. Wind outlook, yellow area, 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. So, nothing too crazy about the wind threat today. And then the hail threat is significant in certain portions of the state. The red area, that is a 30% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch. And then you also have the 10% risk, because you're in the black outlined area, of hail exceeding 2 inch in diameter or larger. And then the yellow area is a 15% risk of that. Now, what could the radar look like today across Illinois? Most of the day will be fine. I mean, we take it into the afternoon hours around 2 p.m. Timing's right here. And this does include Indiana, by the way, too. We get a 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight tonight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m. And then this is 7 a.m. This is a lot of storms firing tomorrow morning across really the southern areas of Illinois into Indiana. Now, I'm telling you guys, you got to watch out, and let's do exactly what we did for Iowa. Let's look at the latest guidance, and let's fast forward here for the northern portion of Illinois. We only go out to 10 p.m., and it still doesn't show really much of anything in northern Illinois. So, like I said, remember, model guidance isn't exact conclusions. We just show you what we know, and this is all the information that we have right now, and it's not showing much in Illinois. Now, I do want to kind of go back to, what is this? This is South Dakota. We're getting storms right now in South Dakota in certain portions of it, but the tornado risk is a 5% risk in the far eastern sections of the state, 2% risk in the green, 5% risk in the brown. But overall, there will be a chance the storms could refire in some of these areas today. But the severe threat isn't that bad in South Dakota. It's really just the extreme eastern portions of the state. And, wind outlook, yellow is a 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. But the hail outlook, if any additional storms can fire in extreme eastern South Dakota, they could produce significant size hail. So the red area, Brookings, Sioux Falls, 30% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch. The yellow is a 15% risk, and the black outline region, which covers the red and portions of the yellow, that's a 10% risk of significant sized hail, 2 inch in diameter or larger. Now, the radar could look like, actually, most of those storms have already moved in and out in eastern South Dakota. So what we'll watch for today is you're really close to that low pressure. But we got a lot of just plain stable rain in the western portion of the state, as you can tell. We're getting to 2 p.m., 3 p.m. And then look, you see these cells kind of south and really southeast of Aberdeen, South Dakota. I'm telling you, don't let this catch you by surprise. If you live in the extreme eastern counties of South Dakota, some supercells are possible to develop this afternoon and then quickly move into Minnesota and Iowa. But it's going to be tough to figure out exactly if they will fire or not. Nebraska, kind of the same deal as South Dakota. Extreme eastern portions of the state do have in the brown a 5% risk of a tornado, including Omaha. Lincoln, you're in that 2% risk in the green. But overall, everything's kind of shunted off to the eastern portion of the state. The wind threat isn't that big of a deal today. The far northeast portion of the state does have a 15% risk in the yellow of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. But if any storms can form, additional storms, I would say, in extreme eastern Nebraska, it could produce significant sized hail. So Omaha, 30% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch. In the red, the yellow is a 15% risk of the hail exceeding 1 inch. And then the black outline regions, that's a 10% risk of hail exceeding 2 inch in diameter or larger, which does include Lincoln and Omaha and places like that. Now, what the radar could look like today in Nebraska. This morning, it's pretty quiet. We will see if the atmosphere can become unstable in extreme eastern portions of the state. So we get into 5 p.m., 6 p.m. Some storms do try to develop in central areas of the state, and then they will try to maybe hit severe limits in the far eastern sections of the state. But, this particular run doesn't show much of anything today in Nebraska, except those storms that could potentially form the central portion of the state, and they very well could. Missouri, tricky state too. Nothing might not happen in Missouri today. But there is a risk because the atmosphere is unstable. It just doesn't get tapped into. So northern half of Missouri and the brown, 5% risk of a tornado. Kansas City, St. Joseph, Columbia, Memphis, Hannibal. And then you got a small green area that has a 2% risk of a tornado. Joplin, Jefferson City, etc. Now we look at the wind outlook. In the yellow, that is a 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. We back out of that. In the hail outlook, in the red area, if any storms do form, they could produce pretty large hail. Red area, St. Joseph, Maryville, Kansas City, 30% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. The yellow, 15% risk. And then that black outline region, which does cover some of the yellow area, but all of the red, that's a 10% risk at significant sized hail, 2 inch in diameter or larger. Now, what it could look like today in Missouri, we start to get to about late morning. Obviously, nothing's going on. We get into the early afternoon. If you're wondering what time frame we're at, it says 2 p.m. right there. We get to 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m. A couple storms begin to fire in the northwestern portion of the state. Maybe some showers and storms really anywhere in the state. And then you see a couple clusters of storms. Now, this is around 11 p.m. tonight. Topeka to St. Joseph, north of Kansas City. If these storms do form right here, it's later at night, and they could produce all hazards. So be aware, even though your risk isn't as high to your neighbors to the north, be aware of these storms that fire up after sunset tonight. Kind of, might drift into Kansas City after midnight. Produce large hail, damaging winds, maybe a brief tornado, and it kind of becomes linear. So we get to 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., just clusters of storms all of a sudden explode after the sunsets tonight in these areas. This is 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. So it just starts off with some clustering of storms around 10, 11 p.m. And it could be earlier, it could be later than this around Topeka. And I know I'm talking about Kansas into northwestern sections of the state of Missouri. And then everything kind of grows upscale after that and gets more significant potentially. So Kansas, we do have that 5% risk of a tornado in the brown, Kansas City, Topeka, Emporia, Wichita, 5% risk of a tornado. The green area is a 2% risk of a tornado. We back this up and we look at the wind outlook for Kansas. The yellow is a 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. And then we look at the hail outlook. The far northeast section of the state does have a 30% risk of hail. And then the yellow is a 15% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in the black outline region, which covers all the red and a good chunk of the yellow area. That is a 10% risk of hail exceeding 2 inch in diameter or larger. And it's really the same thing with Kansas as Missouri. We have to really watch later in the time period. We get the 4 p.m. time frame up here. Getting to 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m. Not a whole lot going on. 8 p.m., 9 p.m. Look at this one cell popping up between Wichita, Manhattan, and then boom, it grows and gets a little bit stronger, starts to move northeast, and we got a stronger cell up towards Topeka. And then they grow even larger, could even have another cell that develops south of Manhattan. I'm telling you, don't ignore the southern mode. We're starting to get into that southern mode now. We're in Kansas. These could produce a tornado. They could produce large hail. Not as good as kinematics, better wind flow aloft that supports tornadic activity, but they could still get going. Large hail, gigantic hail with some of these storms could get going. Topeka, just be careful, I would say, in the eastern sections of the state today for these storms. And then look at, as you're getting after midnight tonight, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., a lot of clustering of storms from Wichita to Topeka, point southeast, gets going and just could be a loud overnight period in this section of the state. Oklahoma, there is a 5% risk of a tornado in the brown that goes right through the heart of Oklahoma, includes Oklahoma City, Stillwater, down to Lawton. That is in the brown. The green is a 2% risk of a tornado. And speaking on the wind outlook, we're doing pretty good on time. The wind outlook, this is in the yellow. That's a 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. This includes that yellow region. And then the hail outlook, the yellow is a 15% risk, running out of gas, of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger, and the black outline region is a 10% risk of significant sized hail, which is 2 inch in diameter or larger. And it's the same kind of concept as Kansas. Will storms form? We start to get to about lunchtime today, not a whole lot going on. We start to get to the middle of the afternoon. It's around 4 p.m. Time is up here. 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m. Not a whole lot going on. Maybe some showers, downpours. 9 p.m., 10 p.m., and then bang, some big explosive storms potentially get going around Elk City, western, central Oklahoma. And I'm telling you, the tornado threat isn't as high down here because you lack flow aloft, but you have explosive energy in the atmosphere that supports very large hail and some damaging winds. So we could have a few supercells that develop Elk City to Oklahoma City, and then they begin to drift north and northeast. And I'm telling you, please be careful of some very large hail with some of these cells. This is like midnight. This is 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Look at these storms draping across the northern counties of Oklahoma. Just be aware of these guys. I mean, you don't have that higher end severe weather threat, but who knows? Maybe you end up getting an enhanced risk down here in later outlooks. But, you know, it does show some powerful supercells developing here in western and west central Oklahoma. And guys, it's around 8 to 10 p.m. and then they drift north. Okay? So just be aware of those cells today. Last state we'll cover is Texas. That 5% risk does extend all the way down into northern areas of Texas between Wichita Falls and Childress. The green area is a 2% risk of a tornado, gets all the way down to Midland, Abilene, San Angelo. And then there is a risk of damaging winds. That yellow area is a 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. And then the hail outlook, that yellow region, that is a 15% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. And the black outline region, that is a 10% risk of hail exceeding 2 inch in diameter or larger. And it's the same thing with Oklahoma, guys. You know, any storms that do form in this area could produce pretty large hail. It's just, do they form? And this latest run does show some powerful storms trying to form between Midland, Big Spring, San Angelo, Abilene. See these storms down here. Lacking flow, 7 p.m., big cluster of storms forming near San Angelo. But any storms that do form in this area could produce very large hail, guys. So just be aware of that for later on this afternoon, this evening, in west central and just southwestern areas of Texas. Now, just take a look at some parameters here. The ingredients will be there for tornadoes. Let's take it to the prime portion of the day. Like this is around 4 p.m. this afternoon Central Time. Significant tornado parameter, the higher the number, the better the ingredients for tornadoes. And just because you have really good ingredients for tornadoes, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get tornadoes. You actually have to have storms that fire take advantage of the atmosphere at play. But you see the pinks, the whites, I mean the 9s, 8s on the significant tornado parameter. The atmosphere will be loaded for ingredients to support tornadoes. And it gets even more violent as far as atmosphere ingredients as it progresses into Wisconsin, the far southeastern portion of Minnesota, northeastern areas of Iowa. It maxes out right into here. High end ingredients for tornadoes. It's just will they get going? And you look at the updraft helicity swath with the storms that does form, and it picks up on some clustering of storms right in the 15% risk area. I mean, this is where the most highlighted area is, and then it picks up on one lone cell down here that I showed you when we showed Iowa. And then the damaging winds. What we will show you guys that really fast. The damaging wind swath, and this is just between now. This is just between now and like 10, 11 p.m. Look at the strong gusty winds in the UP, but you see the clusterings of 40, 50, 60 miles per hour. And just to wrap this up, guys, I'm not going to make this go in motion. I'm going to show you the same time period. This is 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. This is your low-level jet. This is kinematics. Check this off the box. We got a low-level jet coming in general out the south, pushing 50 to 60 knots. A lot of wind energy to drive any supercells, any storms that form today. A lot of wind energy to drive the damaging wind threat, lift for storms, and enough to put a bit of a spin in the atmosphere as you have a difference in flow, directional shear between the mid-levels and the low levels. That puts that spin in the atmosphere. So check that off the box. The dew points will be there, rich, moisture surging north from the lower latitudes, dew points in the 60s. When you get dew points in the 60s and 70s, that supports storm development, and we'll get that today. Next thing you look at is the CAPE values, explosive CAPE. I mean, 3,000 joules per kilogram that extends all the way up into Wisconsin, Minnesota. Explosive energy in the atmosphere, but will it get tapped into? That's the big question. And to really wrap this up, tomorrow we still have the enhanced risk. We have a slight risk that extends all the way down to Texas and Oklahoma, okay, and it goes all the way up into the enhanced risk area. So tornado threat, not as high as I thought it would be. 2% risk down here, 2% risk up in this region. Wind threat, we do have a higher end wind threat right here where the enhanced risk area is, which is what's driving the enhanced risk. This goes from Columbus up to Syracuse. 30% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour, which makes sense with a low-level jet that will be ahead. And then there is 2 areas, a bimodal kind of setup, where we have a hatched risk of significant hail. So in the black outline region, in the yellow areas, that is a 10% risk of significant sized hail. So that's as far out as I'm going to go. Thank y'all for tuning in. Appreciate y'all's support. Stay safe out there today. God bless all y'all. Be praying for you folks. And we'll have you another update probably sometime tonight, maybe tomorrow morning. God bless.